Welcome to the Stop Suffering in Silence podcast with your host, Denise Walsh and Rachel Timothy.
Good morning, or afternoon, or evening, whatever time it is when you are listening.
It's morning time here.
It's morning time here, and you are listening to Stop Suffering in Silence. My name is Denise Walsh, and I'm here with co-host Rachel Timothy. And today we are going to talk a bit about the event that we just went to. Rachel, we are getting invited to speak. We are traveling around the country. Our goal is like one event per month. And this last weekend, we were invited to an event here in Michigan that actually was born out of an event that we did in Nashville a few months ago. So I guess let's start there. Like, even getting to this event was a God thing, wasn't it?
No, it for sure was. And I have to say, like you say, goal is one a month. And it's almost become more like our limit is one a month because we are getting so many opportunities. And it's like God has just opened the floodgates. And so we've had to cap ourselves at one a month.
Yeah. And the biggest reason for that is because we have children and other
Yes.
things that we're doing.
Yes.
So yeah, limiting to month, especially when it's traveling and driving and flying and all these kinds of things. But it's super fun to have an opportunity to create the space for such a special and important conversation.
Yeah.
But we were invited to host a booth in Nashville at an event a few months ago. And, I think there's always pros and cons to every experience. And there were some things we were like, well, we're not quite sure about that. And then there are some things that we were really excited about, and just meeting different people and networking and getting to know the other booth members and everybody that was there. Needless to say, we got invited to an event in Michigan a few months down the road, and it ended up being at our friend's church. So it was again like a small world. Like, oh my gosh, wait a minute. So you're doing an event and our friends go there. And so we were able to stay at our friend's house for the entire weekend. But then we book up our weekend, right? Because we don't just want to come for one event. We want to use our time wisely. And so we ended up doing a house party. I guess party is not the word. A house
event.
Yeah. At our friend's house. And we had about 25 mostly women there, a few guys who came to hear your story. So let's first talk about that experience.
Yeah, so it was interesting for me because I had driven 9 hours, that whole morning, day, afternoon, whatever. And we get there and within a few hours, we're going to have a house full of people who know a little bit typically about my story, but not a ton. They just know trafficking, and they come ready to learn. Some of them come with their own experiences, their own stories. And there were pieces of it that had me a little bit more nervous because I knew of some survivors of abuse that were going to be sitting in the crowd, and it was still somewhat fresh. And so I had a little bit of just extra prayer around them and what I was going to say. And as people started showing up early and the conversations started, and I was learning where people are at and the school districts they're a part of and the churches they're a part of. And it was neat to get to know them just a little bit before I then sat down and shared with them my story.
And so typically at these home events, Rachel shares her story for about an hour. You talk about grooming and gaslighting and the mind tricks and the confusion and all of the things that surround your story. And so for those who are sitting in the audience and have had their own situation, I think oftentimes they're able to see themselves in pieces of your story. Like, okay, I was tricked. This was not just me making bad choices or me like being led down a wrong path. It was like they did that on purpose to manipulate me. I mean, we just hear all these stories of people going, oh my gosh, that's it. That's what happened. Yes. And I know we felt that on Thursday as well.
We did. And I think also it helps people who maybe haven't experienced it to view other survivors a bit differently. When you can see what a mind of a survivor or victim at the time is going through, it gives you a bit more compassion and realization as to, okay, this is why their brain reacted the way it did for months or years or whatever following the traumatic event. This is why it's so important that people believed and knew what happened. I think it just gives you a different perspective.
Yeah. Well, I think I mean, is somebody listening to the audience or in the audience to put themselves in a survivor's shoes to go, yeah, how do you respond when a
Mhm.
police officer says, okay, tell me the whole story? And you're like, and your brain literally cannot speak, like it cannot form sentences, or the disassociation and the flashbacks that come that aren't necessarily linear, and you don't really know what happened. But, there's a lot of things that survivors don't quite even understand themselves. And so for them to gain understanding is helpful, but then also for other like family members and supporters to gain understanding is helpful as well.
Yeah. And it was cool because in some situations we had a mom and then daughters there. And so they then get to go home and have the conversations because we talk about the dangers of their phone and the dangers of, where they're at party wise and what to look for, and then relationships with adults and what that should and shouldn't look like. And so I had a mom come up to me afterwards who said, I've always been a helicopter mom as far as knowing where my kids are at. Like if we're at a park, they know I have to keep eyes on them because I was terrified they were going to be taken, kidnapped, whatever. She said, but this I didn't even know existed. And so I wasn't protecting them in this way. Like if I knew they were with a teacher or with a coach or whatever, it felt like a safe place to leave my child. And so it gives you, like I always say, knowledge is power.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know, how can you protect your kids?
Right. Right. So Thursday was a really powerful way to launch the weekend. And the funny part is we didn't even really know if it was going to happen. It was like
Yeah.
a week before we thought, oh yeah, let's throw this event together. And we had a full house and tears. And I mean, you have a powerful story. And I think the power is also people seeing themselves in it. So the conversation afterwards, the Q&A, and the conversation we know people even had the next day of realizing and coming to their own understanding of what they experienced, all of that. The goal is to provide a level of healing. We open blind eyes by sharing your story, but then also support those on the healing journey. And so hopefully the idea is that because of these open conversations, healing can start happening.
Yeah, and one of the neat conversations I had afterwards was with a man who, he had a wife that had been abused as a child, and some children through their growing up years have some issues too, with abuse and assault, and just having that conversation with him of how he can handle and move forward with his wife and his children when things just don't seem to make sense. That trauma brain, him understanding a trauma brain was super important and
Yeah.
opened his eyes a lot.
One thing you mentioned that I never heard before, but I think I love, and I think we should start saying it more, was the fact that safety can be considered a love language.
Yeah.
That was a really powerful thing for the men in the room to hear, because some of the girls are living in fear. I mean, rightly so. After you've experienced assault, like you're living in fear and you're checking the doors and you're trying, you're on edge. And
Mhm.
so for the in this situation, for the spouses to understand that actually you help supporting and keeping her safe gives her a space to relax.
Yes. Yeah. I had never heard that before, but somebody else had shared just in passing, yeah, safety's my love language. And I thought, oh, you know what? I think it's a lot of people's love language. And it's not one of the five. And when I said it, somebody was like, no, 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 that's not one of the five. I know. I think there's probably more than just five love languages. And I do think safety is one.
Well, and I think there's a level of, I mean, that's trust. If I truly believe that I'm safe around you and I know that you are being thoughtful in supporting my desire and need for safety, it builds trust. And
Yeah.
that trust in turn, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, continues to support the safety. Does that make sense?
I think so. I think I followed you.
Yeah, because if I trust you, I also feel safe.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was just neat getting to see the men's reaction, the females' reaction. And it was a vulnerable place, but you could tell like there were some aha moments, some discussions that were going to be happening later. And I don't know, it was just kind of, it's always neat to be a part of.
Yeah. Yeah, it was powerful.
It
And
was.
so that was Thursday. And then Friday came around. Now, again, so let me tell you the backstory about how this event got booked. So this event took place in the Detroit area of Michigan. And so we connected with some people that I know that live near Detroit and said, hey, who do you know that's either in the school system, the police department, or a hospital setting that would be interested in hearing Rachel's story? And like, can you get us connected? And so a friend messaged, she had the email of the SANE director of U of M Flint. So SANE stands for Sexual Assault Nurse Examiner. And it's basically the person who would hopefully, if there's enough of them, would see the survivor when they come into the ER for support and just be a trauma-informed nurse and create an experience that is not re-traumatizing is the goal. And so we talked with the head of the SANE program. So basically, you can get this extra certification once you've been a nurse already. So all the ladies that are in this class have been a nurse in some capacity for years. They now want to get the certification so they can be somebody that's available for assault survivors when they come in. And basically the whole course is e-course, like videos and books that you read on your own time and tests that you take and Zooms and things. But they meet in person a few times a year. And they happen to be meeting in person the weekend we were there. So Friday morning, we were able to drive to U of M Flint and meet with this class in person. We had an hour, but like we went way over and they were just glued to Rachel's story. So we got to share Rachel's story and then also do some Q&A. And one thing again leads to another. We're going to again be a part of their ongoing curriculum. So every semester, most likely on Zoom, we'll have a chance to share Rachel's story live, do Q&A, and connect with those in the certification. So that was another God thing. Like, oh my gosh, perfect. Like, I can't even imagine it being any more perfect. And so tell us a bit about what you experienced in the classroom.
Yeah, it was funny because one of the ladies there said, I don't believe in coincidences. So this is definitely a God thing that you guys are here. There was a lot of cool conversations in the midst, but probably the coolest is this one lady. She's like, after I got done speaking, she goes, I just want you to know that I've heard you speak. And guys, mind you, I've only spoken to one other group of nurses ever. And she just so happened to be on a Zoom to hear it in that particular meeting. I think it was back in April. And from her hearing my story then, she shared with me she decided to become a SANE nurse. And so she was in this curriculum because she had heard my story. And I don't think there was a dry eye in the room at that moment.
We were all just like, and it's so cool, Rachel, because you don't often hear the ripple effects
No.
of what happens after you share. And sometimes it can feel like people are shock and awe in the moment, but then they go back to their lives and you never really know if it impacts anything or if it changes anything, and we know that it does, like, don't get me wrong, but we don't often always hear that. So for her to say, I heard you a few months ago, and the reason I took this certification is because of your story. She read your book. She passed your book around to the detectives in her local area. And it was a really powerful moment. And I think it was cool for the teachers to see that
Mhm.
this is, I mean, you have a powerful story and you share it really well. So yeah, I think we all were like in
Yeah,
tears.
definitely. One of the things that I recognized that you shared that I thought was powerful, is you told all of the nurses to look at me and see me as I am right now. I'm speaking well, I'm competent, I'm able to share with you my story. I'm a mom, I'm a friend, I'm a wife. This is who I am. But when you see these victims coming into the ER, you're not going to see me as I look right now. Like I'm going to be traumatized. I'm going to have more of an appearance of somebody who is maybe mentally ill. You're not in your normal rational mind at that point. And for them to be able to see me as I am and then recognize, okay, when I went into the ER, this isn't how what I portrayed, it helps them recognize more of who they're working with.
Well, and I know for myself, when I was called into the ER as a therapist, like to do evaluations or things, I mean, you would see people at the worst of their worst. Their hair's all matted, they have no makeup, they're wearing scrubs and like biggy, bulky clothes. They're, you know, like drawn. I mean, they're not in a healthy state at all. And what I think is really important for everybody who's working with those who are on the front lines, working with people in their worst of their worst times, is to remember that that's not who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because you can get jaded, and we talked a bit about that too. It can
Yeah.
be tricky to have that care and compassion if you've been lied to, or you're being sworn at, or somebody's coming off of substances, or you are understaffed and you've got all these other things happening. But just to remember that that girl sitting, like, in that ER room, that's not who she is. That's
Yeah.
a situation she's experiencing right now.
Yeah. So that was like they even had said, we do get jaded. Like that is, and it's just because from being lied to all the time. But then we also had a great conversation about what to do if, let's say, a trafficker brings in somebody and being able to recognize and separate the two people. Anytime somebody comes in with a patient, you really do need to separate who's ever with them for a time, whether the patient is saying no or the person with them saying no. It's important to have that separation to have a conversation of, are you safe? Is everything okay? And they talked about how oftentimes, like let's say there's a language barrier. We feel like we need that person there so that we can communicate better. And you don't realize that could be part of the plan to keep this hidden.
The other thing we mentioned was always having a notebook in the room,
Yeah.
because we know that part of the trauma response is to impact the Broca's, is that what it's called? Broca's area of the brain, which basically makes it really challenging for a survivor to speak. And absolutely, I mean, you guys have, I'm sure we've all had times where it's like, I want to tell you, but I literally can't speak. And so writing it down can be a game changer, even if it's just yes or no, or a couple words. Obviously, somebody might not give you a whole paragraph of detailedness in a linear fashion. However, having a pen and paper nearby could be really, really helpful if you're trying to find out what's really going on.
Yeah, I've used that before. I went to a doctor's office and I shared this with them. I went to an OBGYN for the whole purpose of being seen because of an assault that I had had recently. And I went in there and I had the conversations with the nurses, and the doctor even came in and I couldn't get the words out. Like it was just not going to happen. And I'm sure I looked super rude, not really making eye contact, not commenting beyond the necessity, I guess, of what I needed to say. But the doctor had left the room for some reason. I don't even really know why. And there happened to be a pad of paper there and a pen. And so I wrote down, I was assaulted, however many days ago. And when she came back in, she read it. And then we moved forward from there. And I probably wouldn't have told them otherwise. I think another interesting part that I'm recognizing in this moment is they could have rushed it. I probably looked like I didn't want to be there. I probably, this is a waste of time. I don't even understand why she's here. I heard that with police officers as well. And take like her leaving the room for a second for me to catch my breath and to have a chance to write, it made it to where I was able to voice it through a pen and paper.
Yeah. And I think at that time, they don't need to know all the details. They don't need to know the linear explanation. They need to go, okay, we got you, and take care of what needs to taken care
And
of.
what was interesting, again, this is all I'm just remembering, but she already knew. She could tell. Like I'd already had an exam, and so she said she actually already knew. So maybe that's why she gave me a chance to, I don't know, but she had seen bruises and stuff, and so she kind of already knew. But she hadn't mentioned anything to me either. So,
Now, one thing we didn't mention to the nurses in this situation that I like in our talk that I think next time we could make sure is on our list is the detailed notes, because now if you go back to look at the records, some of it is super clear and super helpful, and some of it is like super generic and not helpful at all. And so
yeah,
the nursing staff really taking good helpful notes is important, whether the survivor needs it in a year or 3 years, 5 years, whatever.
needs it as in for proof, evidence moving
Yeah.
forward, justice wise. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So I don't know that we mentioned it, but we should put it on
Mm-mm.
our list.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So then we went to the event. So the event was, let me see, Friday afternoon and evening, and then all day Saturday with a ton of different speakers. And so we were at our booth. We really didn't get to hear a ton of the speakers. We just chatted with those in the hallway, hanging out, that kind of thing. Tell us a bit about how expos and like mingling and all of these things are for you. Do you have anything to add to like the expo part, I guess?
Well, I mean, it's not my fave. Crowds of people are exhausting for me because I'm constantly scanning the room. And I would occasionally be like, Denise, check, this guy over here is creeping me out or whatever, just different because I'm constantly looking at body language, eyes, every person that comes in. And so I'm exhausted. And then you need to be, personable and share something super vulnerable in a matter of like 30 seconds with the person who walks up to your table. So no, it's not easy. And I think there was a point where you and I looked at each other and we're like, I don't think we're going to do this again. But yet, as the night went on and then the next day, more connections started to be made. And it was like, okay, maybe this is actually, worth it, but it is hard.
Yeah, I find it really fascinating because we get, I'm always just so curious about how people respond and what that really means. So
Yeah,
in
so
the
you're getting a chance to see from my eyes what it's
Mhm.
like to share my story and people's responses.
Yes, because I've always only known you in like a house event where people are here to hear you, and they
Mm.
respond great and they ask insightful questions, and there's so much love. In Nashville during the expo, we would share. So I give like a 30-second spiel of what the booth is all about. We educate people on trauma and trafficking. This is Rachel's story. And we also empower those on the healing journey. And I share a little bit about, a 2-sentence story, a story. And in Nashville, I found people would go, oh, and they would like turn around and walk away. And not always, or they would bring it back to something they understand. It's kind of like saying, oh, you live in Michigan? I know someone who lives in Michigan.
Yeah.
And so they would say, oh, you've been trafficked? Yeah, that border is crazy. And they would start bringing things to the border, or they were just trying to make some sort of connection. It felt like, oh, I know a bit about that too.
Mm-hmm.
But it never was actually relevant or helpful. And
And so Denise started a human experiment.
so I started shifting the way that I share her story
Yes.
just to see if it elicits a different response. Now, in Michigan, when we did more of the people in the Michigan event that came to the table were women.
Mm-hmm.
And that could have been a difference because a good amount of the people that came in Nashville were guys. And so they might have been like awkward leaving. Like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But the women who came this time, most of them, they wanted to learn more. And I think that's a emotionally healthy way to respond typically is like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Tell me more. Or, I want to learn more, that I want to have a conversation about you, not necessarily bringing it back to them.
Mhm.
But I guess every event is going to be different based on the people who are there. And then I'll just keep playing with the story to like see what piece of it people go, oh my gosh, I'm interested. And
Yeah.
that will probably change at every event too.
Yeah. And one of the things I think you recognized is the more that you extreme that you put into the two sentences that you share, the more likely they are to walk away. Versus if you keep it kind of generic and less extreme, then they want to ask more questions. And what's interesting is it's very similar with a survivor who's sharing their story. And I was told this, and I've probably shared it on here before, but a police officer shared with me that these predators will do extreme things, crazy things to you for the purpose of when you go to share it with somebody, you sound crazy. And so when you're sharing with somebody, the extreme things that legitimately happened, you don't feel like you can share because at that moment, the person will walk away and say, no, this is too much, or nope, this isn't real.
And I think it's another example of how a survivor has to put a toe in.
Yes.
How are you going to respond to just this piece of information? Okay, all right. How are you going to respond to this piece of information? And again, it's just interesting information to experience it, and then for you to be living it, knowing that, all right, I just give people the watered down version of my story, or at least just to even see if they can palate that before
Yeah.
I go any further.
So then take this from a stance of trying to make friends as a survivor. Like you get a piece of like, this is who I am. When do I share it? How do I share it? How much do I share it? Should I even share it? It's very difficult. It's very, very hard.
Yeah, that's a lot of trying to figure out other people, which is a whole other added stress when,
Yeah, because you want to be friends, but yet you want to be real.
right. In reality, most people don't necessarily have to think about worrying or even considering how someone's going to respond to them.
Mm-hmm.
It's another layer of brain space that's being taken because you're kind of always watching to see how they respond and if it's okay or
If
if
it's safe.
safe. Yeah.
And I don't mean physically unsafe, but just emotionally unsafe to share.
Right. Right.
Mm.
This event I felt like was very receptive. Most people were responsive and asking questions and engaged. And in fact, they had media kind of stations all over, and you were asked to do an interview while we were
Yeah.
there. Tell us a
Yeah.
bit about that experience.
This was cool. I had a lady come up to me and she said, You're Rachel Timothy, right? And I said, Yeah. And she said, I've read your book. I would love to interview you. And I was like, Oh, how'd you read my book? And because I knew she was from Florida. And she said, I actually got it, a few years ago. And I was like, Really? How'd you even hear about it? And she went on to share with me about how she used to be a school teacher. And she had a situation at her school, it was a high school, where it was actually a female teacher and about five of the students, boys, who she started to get this vibe, this feeling, this uneasiness, seeing little red flags that made her feel like something more was going on. And so she started to research. And in the process of researching, she came across Open Blind Eyes. And she ordered it from Amazon and she read it. And after reading it, she was like, Yep, something is going on here. It's not okay. And so she went to the school board and she went to, the superintendent and the principals and all of that. And she got fired. This lady, for coming forward, got fired. And here then it had been a couple years later, and she's like, okay, maybe I really did see all of the signs wrong. Maybe there really wasn't anything there. And then she got a phone call from a grandma of one of those boys and confirmed all that she had thought and more as far as what that teacher was doing with these boys. And now the teacher is in prison for above and beyond what she ever thought she was even doing. And so it was really cool for me to get to hear again, the ripple effect. It's super vulnerable to share your story. It's hard to have written a book and publish it, and people can take and do with it and say about it whatever they want. But when you hear lives are changed, it's like, holy cow, God, I thank you for bringing purpose for my pain. And I mean, just getting to see that ripple effect was really cool.
And so she was the one that interviewed you for her podcast.
Yes.
Is that right?
Okay, so
Or something that she has?
I guess it might have been a podcast. It might have been, I don't really know what it exactly. I should have asked more details. But it was videoed, and it was probably a 10-15 minute video, and she was interviewing several people. But it was a really good conversation. And she comes from a place now of like a mom wanting to educate anybody and everybody that she can in Florida. And she shared with me some of the new laws that had passed in Florida as far as trafficking, and repeat offenders get the death sentence. And yeah, just different things that she's been working with legislation, and
Wow.
asked me if I have been, and I'm like, no, but I am starting to find that I kind of want to.
Yeah. Wow. That's again, that's why these events, and even though there's times where we're like, well, in my opinion, I really love the deeper conversations, right? So the house events, or, the nursing where we could actually share your full story and have time for Q&A, like the 30-second drive by, like walking by person is less interesting, but there's so many more people to get to know, and the right connections are made for then further conversation down the line. So I think it's really cool.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. So next up was a 15-minute story where you got to share. Now, this was Saturday afternoon. And in my experience, right, if we're going to have a time slot, we would love for it to be earlier in the event, so then people can come to our booth and because that's when people actually know what you do and who you are.
Mm-hmm.
However, you get what you get. So it was like a 4:30, something like that, afternoon time slot where you got 15 minutes to share your story. Now, I have to say, these events are intense. There's 50 some speakers. There's no break. So it's speaker, 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 speaker. And you don't really know who's next. Like, there's the health people, there's like tons of different people. There's pastors, there's a lot. O.U.R, Operation Underground Railroad, was there. The J6, where their family members are still in prison from the January 6th experience. And some of them weren't even like in the midst of anything. And so it's shocking, but there's a lot of different people. There's a lot of different conversations. And the person before you was like a loud, he was really great and fun, but he was like intense and in your face and like rah, 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 the crowd. And then they're
Mm-hmm.
like, thank you. And now we have Rachel.
Yeah.
And again, the crowd doesn't know what you're going to talk about. It doesn't say Rachel Timothy, trafficking survivor, on the bulletin. It just says your name. Like, there's no bio, there's no nothing. However, I was sitting in the front and recording it, and that's already posted on our YouTube channel. So if you haven't seen that, go check it out. Rachel took her story that she normally spends an hour telling and put it down into 15 minutes. But I was sitting in the crowd and I could hear them go, oh my gosh, like they were so glued in to what you were saying. And I heard even those speakers after you continued to refer to you and say, this is why we do what we do. This is the most important part of this entire conference. Rah-rah is great, but this is the why and the heartbeat behind why we're being loud and asking for change and things like that. So anyway, I'd love to hear your side of your experience in sharing your story.
Yeah. So, goodness, I had a peace walking up there, which was 100% God. And I had felt like God had put a particular scripture, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. And as I was meditating on that scripture throughout the weekend, it felt like God was saying, this is your story in a nutshell. And so I kind of used it as my guideline for how I shared my story. And I could hear the gasps as well. I could not see facial expressions, which is a bit hard. The lights were in my eyes, and so I couldn't see facial expressions. So I was glad to be able to hear some things because you don't know. Like you want to be able to feel the crowd and know what they're experiencing as you're sharing. Um, and so it was good for me to get to hear their response of, okay, they're engaged, they're listening, I have their attention. And it was powerful. The 15 minutes went by so fast. And I only, was able to share just a portion of my childhood story. But when I walked off the stage, I was immediately met by a woman that I don't know. She walked over to me and she got about 2 inches from my face. And she said, God is using you in very, very big ways. And just poured into me for about 5 minutes, about 2 inches from my face. But and it was powerful and it was really beautiful, the things that she was saying, and some of the things brought me to tears. And then as I continued to walk back, person after person just grabbed me and hugged me and said, I'm sorry, like this is not okay. And before long, guys, our booth was packed and my books were sold out and people were coming up. I had at least 3 women share they experienced something similar in their life. And then I had one man share that his wife experienced something similar. And so, it was 15 minutes, like big whoop, but the ripple effect that we got to see just right then and there was incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's great to know that you can make an impact in 15 minutes like that.
Yeah. Like what the story God has given me can make an impact in 15 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. Because again, I think when we continue to speak or we're continued to ask to speak, we can let them know, people know, we'll take an hour if you've got it, but at least give us 15 minutes. And the ripple of that is powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I don't remember what I was going to say now.
I was going to move on to the panel because part
Yeah.
of Saturday afternoon was not just like you shared your story, but you also got a chance to be on a panel with another survivor and then 2 men from O.U.R, which is Operation Underground Railroad. And one of the men who was on the panel with you is kind of like their salesperson, it seems like. And so he travels and speaks on O.U.R's behalf and lets people know what they're up to. And then the other man who was on the panel is on the ground.
Boots on the ground.
What's that?
They would say boots on the ground.
Yeah. And what he does is he basically finagles his way into a situation where then money is exchanged. And then once the money is exchanged, the police, the local police, whoever they're collaborating with can come in and take down the bad guys. Mm-hmm. And so he was very interested in your story and was a great connection. And then it was really powerful for us to hear what he's experienced too. Tell us a bit about your experience. I'm like, I need a new word now. Meeting O.U.R and how that was for you.
Well, like you hear of all these organizations, and there's a lot right now, and you don't know if they're legit, and you don't know, is this money really going somewhere that matters? Is it really going to these children who are being trafficked? Are they really doing what they claim to be doing? And being able to sit across from this guy, and this was not during the panel, this was just, he came and sat behind our booth and he kind of picked our brain and we kind of picked his brain and asked a lot of questions. And just being able to hear his experiences firsthand, or I guess we would be hearing it secondhand, whatever, but was powerful. And the amount of children that he's been able to save as a result of literally having to pretend to be a pedophile. And the way he described it is, I sit across from the devil 1 to 2 times a week. And it's awful. He hears these people talk about these children as property and just awful things said. And he has to keep his composure so that he can then be able to rescue these children or bring in the forces to rescue the children. But I asked a ton of questions and Denise asked a ton of questions. And it was just really neat because to hear how they operate, how they run, and then to see his humbleness, I guess, or realization that what he is doing in rescuing these children overseas is really just a piece, a small piece of the puzzle of trafficking, and him recognizing that the massiveness of it in America is the real is an even bigger problem. And like even whenever they go share and speak, they want people to understand, yes, we're rescuing hundreds of kids and it's great, but there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of kids in America right now going through that exact same thing. And yes, we have a law enforcement and government, but yet it's still getting missed. And so they recognize that my story is actually one of the most common stories there is. And that's what really people need to know.
Yeah. I really appreciated their curiosity.
Yeah.
They didn't come into this event going, we're the experts. Everybody needs to bow down to us. They
Mhm.
came in to this experience and were so eager to learn and just collaborate and connect. And it was a very cool thing to see because with the Sound of Freedom happening and them getting all this attention, it could be very easy for them to be the stars of the show and to kind of stand up there with their chest up being like, yep, here we are. But that wasn't their demeanor at all. Their heart and their demeanor, at least in our experience, was compassionate. It was genuine. And they were just like, we want to fight this too. How can we lock arms and do it together?
Yeah. And one of the things they mentioned that I didn't know, and like you had said, O.U.R is the organization that Sound of Freedom is based off of. And Tim Ballard was supposed to be there and couldn't. And so this other guy is who took his place. But I didn't realize that none of the proceeds of Sound of Freedom goes to O.U.R. They don't get that money and then be able to help kids with it. So they're still that the guys out there fundraising, trying to raise the funds because there's a lot that they need money to be able to do to operate and to take down these huge rings. But I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that movie does not go back to them in any way, shape, or form. It's just to open eyes.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing we didn't quite realize was the aftercare that
Yeah.
the survivors get when they're rescued. It's not like, as we know, that's not the end of the story.
Mhm.
If you guys saw the movie, you saw, oh, good, they're home now. And we're all like, okay, no, like that is not how it works. This is not over. The healing journey is just now beginning. And so they have connections and collaborations in all of the different countries that are set up beforehand and ready for anyone who is then saved or taken or rescued from the traffickers to begin the healing process.
Yeah, I just thought that was really cool because that was one of my questions. Like, how do you even know where to take these kids once you get them rescued? And he said, "Oh, no, no, we don't even go in to rescue them until we have an aftercare facility ready to take them."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Dang, good for you guys," because that is the chance of them ending up right back in the same spot is very high without that aftercare.
And it sounds like too, they vet the aftercare. They choose a place that it's not like they go in as O.U.R and start from scratch and build an O.U.R facility. They find people who are already doing what they need and they
Mhm.
help make that place better. So they all speak the native language. They've been there for years. There's trust within the community. And maybe they help bring it up to O.U.R standards with bedding or refrigeration or whatever they need. But then those places continue to be self-running and they now have O.U.R support versus O.U.R starting from scratch in all these different countries.
Yeah, I mean, they've thought through a lot of things in a very survivor friendly way. And so I was really excited to hear a lot of the ways that they do things and felt a piece about, okay, this organization's legit.
And then we found out about the dogs. Can
Oh
you
my
tell
goodness.
about the dogs?
Okay, so just how a dog can be trained to sniff drugs and be able to find it when humans maybe can't. Well, they have dogs that are trained to smell. There's a specific adhesive or glue that is used for a computer chip. And so they are trained to be able to know that smell and to be able to find it. And so they explained how these dogs, it costs $22,000 to train a dog to be able to do this, but they can take a dog into somebody's house and they can find this computer chip that has all of the CP on it, and then be able to take the person into custody. They gave an example, and I did not know this completely, but they were talking about the Subway guy. What was his name?
Jared? Yeah.
Jared from Subway. Which I remember Jared from Subway. He did the Subway diet, lost all the weight, and then we find out he was distributing CP. And so when they first had gotten the tip about him, they went into his house and they couldn't find anything. Like there was evidence nowhere. And so then they brought the dogs in, and it took about 45 minutes for this dog. And he found in the garage in a box, like 3 boxes deep, with wrapping paper all throughout, just kind of crumpled inside, and then taped to the side of this wrapping paper was computer chips. And on it was the evidence they needed to put this guy away. And so, yeah, these dogs they're incredible. And I found out from the lady running it, but probably within a day, she called and said, I just want you to know that we raised $22,000 to get a dog so that they can start doing, more of these investigations and using them. I was like, oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's so cool. And again, it's just another ripple effect of like, yeah, opening blind eyes matters, because people will be moved into action. Some will become sane nurses from hearing your story. Some will share your book with neighborhood moms or detectives or police officers, teachers, and some will donate $22,000 to get a dog that can sniff out predators. It's a really cool thing.
Yeah, so cool. God definitely showed up big time. There was points where, like, I would say to Denise, if the weekend ended right now, I would consider it an amazing weekend. But it just kept coming and coming. And the people we got to meet, there's not enough time or even probably appropriate to share all of the stories that we experienced. But oh, it was just, I left feeling energized. And normally I leave feeling a bit drained.
Yeah, it was really special. It really, really was. So we're open for business, which just means that if you are interested in having Rachel come and share her story at a church, at your home, at a school, police office, or police station, anything like that, please check out the email in the description box and let us know, because we are booking up our 2024 calendar here as well. So thank you, Rachel, for being brave years ago, for writing your book, for having the courage to begin and continue with your healing journey. Because as we know, the stronger, right, that you are, the bigger of an impact you will be making, and you are making waves across the nation. So,
well, thank you to you for giving me a voice, because minus all of that, none of this would be happening. So when people believe and take action, that's just as much a part of the ripple effect. So thank you.
Here. All right. Thank you, guys. Have an amazing, amazing night, and we'll see you next week. Thank you so much for listening to this powerful episode of Stop Suffering in Silence. If you are interested in booking Rachel to speak at your school, your church, or on your podcast, then please email openblindeyes@protonmail.com. If you are interested in sponsoring a survivor on their healing journey and would like to donate to Stop SIS, then please check out the link in the description box or show notes below, or you can email stopsis@protonmail.com. And finally, if you are currently suffering in silence, or you know somebody who is, whether they're dealing with a current trauma or one from the past, then we will always recommend that you reach out to your local resources and find a counselor that you can trust, because nobody is meant to suffer alone. Have an amazing week, and thank you for being here.